But anyway, let's get started. There is virtually nothing to share about the bloom calendar that I know of, unless somebody knows something that's blooming right now. I was just in Scotland. I just got back last week, and there was plenty of stuff blooming there. And it was cold and rainy. So some of the Japanese hybrids were blooming. I couldn't understand that it was it was below freezing. The flowers were out, so not a lot, but enough. If a honeybee could fly, it could get to it. But yeah, I saw some interesting things there. My bees, or the bees in the bee yard, and other bees that I have flown and are still flying. So not crazy flying, but out and looking around for things. Like if there's a box, if there's a box in the yard that has a little bit of comb in it, they might be curious that there might be some stores in there. So it's a really interesting year. We're having all these nice mild days up into November. For the most part, I would say if I was going to go look, and I'm not going to do that, but if I was going to go look in every colony right now, I would imagine I'd find that there are some that are totally broodless at this point. And then, of course, there are some that have a little brood, I would imagine, because there's big populations in some of those colonies. And Peter can tell us more with his measurements, because if in fact there's no brood in your colony at this point, there won't be a big thermal signature. So you might be getting readings in the 70s if you have a thermometer in there or some kind of thermocouple, but you will not get the 95-degree temperatures or 35°C temperatures that you'll get if you have brood. What do you want to talk about, Peter?
So I have 3 active hives right now.
Mm-hmm.
So this first one, not really too meaningful this time of year. It's the weight.
Okay, yeah.
It's relatively steady with little ups and downs. One thing that's interesting though is that I am using condensing colony setup,
Yeah.
and I hear different people talk about how much weight you need for the winter, and it varies from, I'm about 40 pounds, 40 to 50 pounds of stores, I guess you'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But some people say, you should generally be up, if you have 2 deeps, for example, you should be up in the 140-pound range, which I don't think I've ever been there. But so I don't know. You could ask other people what the logic for that is. But and then, as you said, Bill, temperatures are really kind of in the 60s and 70s, maybe touching 80 a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Which would indicate that they're likely to be broodless, not dead, because if they were dead, they'd be ambient temperature. But there's a live cluster of bees in there, but they just don't have to raise the core temperature to the extent that they would if they had brood. So my guess is you can say they're broodless, all of them, because I don't see what do you have. You're given there's some temperature fluctuations, but you don't have anything in the 90s, right?
No, there were
Well, you can see that your what is it, JPL 2 or 3, the red line.
Right. Yep.
You could see it in November 7 that had brood.
Right, and they all did. This goes back to early November, but they all did as you get into September. They were in that brood zone area.
But you can look at your data and watch as the days go on, that colony goes down to what is that, 60, 70 degrees or something.
Right.
And that's when all the brood was emerging. There was nothing else for the bees to heat, so they stopped.
And I did, you see some of these little like hive tube.
Yeah,
That means
that's
I
where
was doing something. And
you
one of them
opened a
was,
colony or something.
yeah, one of them was I did oxalic acid vaporization.
Oh,
I think that was the 11th.
Okay, so it must be, maybe that the sensor measured that temperature.
Yeah. And then the other thing, was humidity, and
which would be tricky to measure anyway. But
Right.
but it's not actually that meaningful. If you're allowing the colony to condense, meaning that there's an envelope in there where the bees can control the moisture content, you're going to get a higher humidity level because that vapor is changing into liquid water constantly as the bees breathe. So you can't the humidity numbers are what they are, but they're not killing the colony. That's for sure. As long as the surface temperature above the colony, above any cluster of bees is above the dew point. If that surface is above the dew point, you won't get any liquid moisture forming over the top of the cluster, and you can run all winter that way. And as far as the 140 pounds of honey or whatever, or whole colony weight of 140, my opinion is that if your colony is relying just on honey for insulation, then that's probably a good number, or 70 pounds above the cluster or something is a good number. But rarely do colonies act like the book says they should act. A lot of my colonies winter in the top box all winter long, up against the insulation. They must feel nice and warm and cozy up there, but that's where they stay. Then they cluster, and then they go down and eat stores, but they don't die, because they're up in the top box right away. And I won't generally have more than, I rarely have 7 frames of honey on my top box or anywhere when I overwinter. Maybe 5 tops. That's a good, solid fall honey collection. What we have, bee lore tells you that you need 100-pound box above bees, so or 70-pound box above bees, and that's just not the case. And bees, the way their metabolism works, they can't eat more than 30 pounds of honey, no matter if you tried to overwinter 40,000 bees, they just don't need that much honey. They would never use 70 pounds of honey. And if they did, I'd like to see that. I mean, just not possible. They don't need that much. So you can bet that if you put some insulation around your colony, they can get away with a whole lot less honey to overwinter than if you didn't.
Hey,
Yeah.
Bill,
Yeah.
Jackie's got a question that kind of pertains to that. Peter had mentioned that he winters over with 40 pounds of stores, and you were just talking about the, bee lore and your
Yeah.
experience. Jackie wants to know, with 40 pounds, do you still typically do need to feed them?
I want to emphasize that beekeeping is observational. So if your colony is well prepared in the fall for overwintering, and you kind of get a feel for how much it weighs, and then it goes light on you, really light, when you try to lift it, and you peek inside on a nice day and you see that all your bees are up on the surface and there's no stores next to them, then you have to feed on an emergency basis. It's not, you can feed them if you want right away. It won't do much. Like my bees, I was feeding them 2 to 1 for weeks, and they just stopped taking it. Once they had enough stores in the colony, they just stopped. And so if there's enough for them, I don't know how you would feed you. You'd have to put in a sugar cake. The trend in beekeeping is to put on suspenders and a belt. Beekeepers like to take care of the bees, so they put on winter cakes right away. I don't do that. I make certain that my bees are well fed in the fall, and then generally you don't ever have to put on emergency food unless it's a very, very stressful winter and real cold and lasts a long time. You will find out in February whether or not you need to feed. So that's the art of beekeeping, figuring that out. When do I need to apply, emergency food? And yeah, and that's not an easy answer.
Okay, then real quick, I want to show you my a new toy.
What do you got here, Peter?
So I have I have a camera, that
Yeah,
I can move around and I can have it focus on different things. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, obviously this is the time of year where I'm going to see that much, but in the spring it should get interesting.
yes.
It's got some neat things. I mean, this is with the lights on. It's dark outside, but I can turn a light on and
On the camera.
on the camera. Yep.
All right, so you have an opportunity coming up. If you're looking at Peter's data, he has pretty, in my opinion, definite temperature signatures to deduce from that he's broodless. So then he has now the option to be able to say, all right, I can do a vaporization, but he already did one on the 11th, and I can't remember the temperature signatures on 11th. Were they still they were descending, but they weren't in the brood range, I don't think. So
No, they weren't.
yeah, so he can pretty much rest assured that and on the 11th, when he vaporized that oxalic acid, he was able to manage the kill. Did you put anything in the colony to see what your drop was, Peter?
Yes.
Like a drop? Yeah.
Yeah, now the only thing, I didn't clean the board right on the same day as the vaporization. So I had a few days prior that it was the boards were on there. But I saw, let me see, 113 in one of the colonies, 213 in another, and 19 in the other one. And I know by your what you published in American Bee Journal,
Yeah.
you would take that, divide it by the number of days,
Mhm.
and then multiply it times a factor of 100, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I was still well under whatever it was, 2,500 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you see the way, again, we're overstepping our deduction, our deductive reasoning, but if you wanted to follow that reasoning, when you saw that temperature slope going down, that means that brood is emerging because it doesn't all come out at once. And the sensor, wherever the sensor's position, is probably, picking up just a gradual fall as the bees are still warming brood, but less and less of it in different areas. So, that means that you get an emerging mite population because their mites are in those brood cells. So what you accomplished on the 11th is a drop of your questing mites, or your phoretic. We used to call them phoretic mites. There's other names for them, but those are the mites you got, the ones that are traveling around on bees. So yeah, so that's a good way to clean up your colony. So that's a thing you can do right now if you wanted to do something to your colony to give it a little bit of extra help against varroa. You can actually dribble also. I wouldn't do it, but you can. I know Randy Oliver does it a lot at low temperatures, or he always has done them at low temperatures, and didn't see any ill effects in the colony. But I just don't like the idea of putting a substance, even if it's warm, on bees. But I guess you could, a liquid substance in the wintertime or in the cold weather. What else we got?
If you're going to vaporize, would you wait till it warms up slightly? Because in the morning it's
Well,
13
it's
degrees.
warm. Yeah, it's perfect temperature right now to vaporize. So
So,
like tomorrow's in the 50s.
yes.
So your bees will actually be flying.
Yep.
Or they'll be coming out of the entrance, fooling around. Not actually flying. Some of the foragers will be going out looking for water. Who knows what they're doing? But they're certainly not bringing any pollen back. Or maybe has anybody seen any pollen coming back in the last couple of days? I haven't seen anything. So
That,
Yeah,
The last week and a half, I've seen a little bit of pollen pellets on the on the debris board through a
yeah,
bottom board,
yeah,
but not much.
not much. So, and
And the
hopefully that's
last couple-
pollen.
The last couple of days where the nights have been a little colder, down in like 40, and last night was 30 something.
Yeah,
So then I'm not seeing that. on those
yeah,
days.
yep,
quick question for you about vapor, right? I guess
yeah,
I'm mindful of the fact that this time of the year, our colonies are much smaller. Therefore, I'm reducing how much vapor, the actual powder I'm putting into the hives. And I guess I just want to raise this as a concern or a question to others when they're treating. Are they being mindful that their hives are smaller and not remembering the 60,000 plus bees during the summertime that they used to have, right? So they're adjusting their vapor dosage.
yeah. Well, you can go by at this point with a lower population of bees. I think that you're safe with going with the recommendations on the label. You really can't legally do anything that's not on the label. And the label has what we have discovered, especially with Cameron Jack's work and others, that we think that the label is grossly underestimated. In other words, the 1 gram for deep is something that Cameron's work especially discovered that it wasn't effective, anywhere near as effective as if you put higher doses. And then there was a dosage level that Cameron reached where he didn't get any extra beneficial effect from. So I think that was around 8 grams. So, stick with the label at this point, and I really can't recommend you doing anything else. But if you happen to slip and put a little bit of extra oxalic acid in your cup or in your, it won't kill your bees. I mean, it just doesn't. And that's the characteristic of vapor. For some reason, it doesn't kill bees. No, you can kill them with a dribble, especially if you do a couple dribbles right in a row. That can have a detrimental effect on your bees. But for the most part, vapor is pretty much harmless.
Are you
Yeah.
advocating a single vapor treatment or multiples?
There's no reason, there's no label violation if you were to do, you can do as many vapor treatments as you want. You just can't do them. The label is vague in that respect. So it gives you a dosage and it gives you a gram count per brood box, but this is nothing about, you can't do it again next week or 5 days later. And people have done that over and over again, have tried all different sort of sequenced treatments, 5 days, 8 days, 7 days, 6 days apart for like what they considered, a whole interval that would cover all emerging varroa. But with the vaporization, you get about a 10-day drop. So you get a big drop right away, which is sort of an accelerated drop. And then for the next 10 days or so, if you've gotten the vapor into the colony correctly and most of the bees were exposed to it, you're going to get a drop that sort of tapers off for the next 10 days. And then after 10 days, you're likely not to get anything, any drop at all. But you can do it with a drop board and see for yourself. It's a really interesting, it's really satisfying when you see that first drop. And then, yeah. But if you've been treating all year, yeah, it's even though you've been treating all year, you still get that fall drop. We're not, those mites are hiding in cells. They come out this time of year when colonies go broodless, and there they are. So it's a good chance to clean them up right now because we have the temperature, the clusters aren't really tight, and the treatment is really efficacious at oxalic acid vaporization is really effective. What else do we have? Didn't we have somebody ask about ventilated colonies or something up here? would the bees eat more honey in a ventilated hive system? Yes. If you overvent your or if you decide that you're going to put ventilation in your colonies in the winter, which is an old, hard to break habit that bee lore sort of perpetuates. If you're going to do that, then it's likely that your colonies will be closer to a survival mode than they would be otherwise if you didn't add any ventilation to them. And in that case, in order for them to maintain their survival temperature profile, they will you have to use more honey, especially the mantle bees, which are closer to that source, will eat more honey to stay warm. They will need more frequent cleansing flights. You know, if they get totally overstressed, you know, lots of things can happen, but yeah, they will eat more honey. Not significantly more, but at least at the top of the honey consumption. I think the next, any other questions about that ventilation piece?
Hi, Bill, it's Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. Okay,
I have one HiveIQ and two things about it. I contacted them because I've needed a shim and a inner cover in order for feeding. And I contacted HiveIQ and I was like, look, I want to use Norroa. You need a shim.
yeah,
And they are working on a shim, but I found somebody, I don't know where he is. He makes them and I'm buying a shim from him and also an inner cover that he makes.
yeah,
But I did an OAV and I have a silicone tip on it, but it melted. I
yeah,
have a hole. And nothing except a Langstroth hive, a wooden Langstroth hive. Like all of the other innovations to me are just problematic. I feel like I've wasted a lot of money on them. But I have this one and I'm going to want to do another OAV and I have to figure out how I'm going to patch that little hole, but also how to prevent another.
yeah.
Do you have
So-
a recommendation?
Yeah, so in woodworking, I don't have one here, I don't think. There are little barbed barrels that we use in woodworking to put a threaded screw into wood. And
Oh.
what that does is I'll look up the thing, Lauren, and send it to you. But
I'd really appreciate that.
yeah, so what you would do is you would slightly increase the diameter of that melted hole, screw one of these barbed barrels into it, and then you'd have a 1/4 thread at the back of the colony.
So the hole that I have is underneath. I put it in the I have holes drilled in all my other hives, but I didn't drill a hole in the
Yeah,
maybe that's what I should have done, drilled a hole in the back of the HiveIQ. I
yeah,
put it through the entrance with the silicone tip on, and now the melted, I don't know, styrofoam, I guess, is underneath.
yeah. All right, well, send me a picture of that. But anyway, so this little sleeve will help you. So I use them on wooden colonies also because it prevents the copper discharge tube from, eventually getting sloppy because it's actually going into a metal device. And then you can use metal again because, I think probably, did you get a lot of vapor in the colony? Because I would think that tube would cause the vapor to just solidify right inside the tube.
There was definitely the crystals were inside that tube. I couldn't really tell if I got a lot of vaporization. And also another criticism of the HiveIQ, no drop board, no way to put a drop board down.
Yeah, they have this thing. Yeah, I know. There's no way to put a drop board down. Yeah. So like you said, in a Langstroth box, you just bring it to your table saw and cut an old Langstroth box into a shim, and you got one. So you don't have to buy all.
Yeah.
But this, I thought about trying to cut down a HiveIQ box, but you need that special lip,
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
it work. So, the only thing I could think of, I made a wooden shim for mine. First of all, I made an adapter that would accept a Langstroth box. And that's just a little wood thing. It's actually quite easy to make. And then I just laid that little frame, very flimsy frame, over the top of the on the top HiveIQ box, and then you could put a Langstroth box on top of it, or you could put a sleeve or anything else you wanted. You could even put in a telescoping cover, your own telescoping cover. You could do whatever you wanted with it after that, but it didn't hold up because
Yeah.
it was so fragile. As soon as I started to move it around, it broke. But yeah, and I showed it to Victor, and I said, make this thing out of plastic. It'll be much durable. Then
Yeah.
people can, but they never did it.
Yeah.
So,
I have to go to puppy class. Thank you so much. I really
all right.
appreciate it. And I would really appreciate to see whatever that sleeve is that you're talking
I'll
about.
try. I'll
Or
look
screw
at.
thing.
Yeah, there's a couple different kinds. They work really well,
Thank you
especially
so
wooden
much.
box. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
All
Have
right.
a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Is there anywhere of hive boxes freezing on the outside if I'm using foam board insulation that isn't exactly fitting close to the
No.
hive?
Nope. No problem. I mean, they won't freeze. All right. So yeah, no, it's no problem. You just have to make sure that it's fitted enough so that bees can't fly in there. So you can have plenty of tolerance. And that's the thing. If you put a foam board sleeve on the outside of Langstroth boxes, they're not ever perfectly aligned. They're always off a little bit. And one might have swollen a little bit, just tiny. So that you have to build a little fudge factor in there so that the sleeve can slide over. And yeah, no, but if there's a space in there, as long as it's not like a ½ inch or something, because that'll cause problems, because the bees will fly up in there when they come back from cleansing flights, and they'll die. So you have to make sure that that's not what's happening there. You have to get it close enough so it fits over the box and not so sloppy that bees can fly up in there.
Jackie started a question. Has anyone started using Norroa yet? Frank replied, yes, we've tried it. So I guess I'm going to open it up to you to kind of, get any comment on that.
So it's really not the time of year to use Norroa. So I don't know. I'd like to hear from folks that have used it, what they did.
I tried the Norroa. I was told that you can use it in the spring and fall just to knock down the mites. I did it beginning of November, maybe. I
Yeah.
put 2 packets in at the top of each hive, and I checked it, and it's basically sugar water and
And
something else.
Verascana, yeah.
Right. Two of the hives, and I checked it in a week because then I closed them up. 2 of my hives had taken them all. They emptied them. One of the hives took maybe 1 package, 1 bag, and one of the hives took like a package and a half. But to answer the question, what's going to happen? I guess I'll
Well,
let you know in February.
Yeah, well, just so we're all clear on how this particular miticide works, is that it will, I hate to use this cliche, but it's sort of like birth control for varroa. So this is not a knockdown kill treatment, right? So you're not going to put Norroa in your colony and look at a big mite drop. That's not how it works. So it has a gradual effect where it interferes with some really technical cellular functions inside the mite, which basically stops the mite's ability to be able to reproduce. Actually, it stops the mite's ability to make eggs. So in that case, if a mite can't make an egg, it can't have offspring. So it's something that would be, subtle, and would keep, if it's working correctly, what it would do is it would keep your mite count at a manageable level. Very much the same as, say, Varoxan would work. right? So Norroa is, our first attempt at a biosynthetic molecule that will work at the cellular level to control varroa. We're hoping for the best with it. So I'm glad to hear it was expensive, right, Frank?
Well, you had to buy one box is two treatments, I guess, or two packets for each hive. It
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
I think about $80, I think it was.
yeah,
Wasn't
so
terrible, but you know,
it's up
I
there.
yeah, I like the vaccine strips also. I like anything that helps organically knock down mites.
Yeah, so
You
you
know,
won't have any with Norroa, you won't have any residue whatsoever in the colony for anything.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so yeah, and it works, and it was specifically engineered just to affect the cellular structures of mites. And bees have, some similar cells, but the way that they designed this uh, synthetic biological agent, it is just directed at mites. They checked it for a lot of things. They checked it against wax moths. They checked it against a number of other hive, uh, some things you might find in hives, and things that were closely related genetically to pests that are inside of a colony, and they tested it at them, and it doesn't have any effect on anything except varroa, because they used a wonderful way to engineer this thing. Now, in the February issue of American Bee Journal, I worked with Greenlight Biologics and two other virologists that were involved in the testing and application of it over the last. I don't know how long they've been working on it. They've been working on it since they purchased it from the Florida trials. I forgot who owned it first, but yeah. So they've been, and I worked with them. I interviewed them. I got them to give me a lot of interesting data on it, and I wrote an article for ABJ, and it's going to be in the January issue, and it sort of will tell you from a technical standpoint how Norroa works. Hopefully it's not too technical. I know when I reread it recently, right before it's going to come out, I was kind of wondering if I did actually go a little bit too deep into virology, because it's a area of science I'm a little bit familiar with, and that's dangerous, because then you could sort of over-explain stuff. But so hopefully it's readable. Maybe some of you can let me know.
Excellent. Okay, so Colleen, I bought a bee cozy from Better Bee. The only vent is in the front smallest entrance opening. I am
Yeah.
concerned this is not good ventilation. Thoughts?
Well, that cozy's not made for ventilation, but there's a place for the entrance, and just put that in line with your entrance. That's all you need to do with that bee cozy. And then put some insulation on the top if you want to really have an effective insulated envelope. I don't know what kind of R value you're going to get out of that bee cozy, but hopefully it works well for you. But yeah, you don't have to worry about it. You don't need to put any ventilation in that colony, other than don't cover the hole with the cozy. You have to make sure bees can fly.
Chuck posted an excellent podcast episode on optimal timing conditions for application of Norroa Better Beekeeping podcast. So thanks for putting that out there, Chuck.
Yeah, it's a good one. And the person that Adam Patchy, the person that is that's on that podcast is somebody I've gotten to know over the last couple months, and him and I collaborated on the article that I wrote in ABJ. So that's the source I used. So we do have that one recent one that came in that says, is there a benefit to insulating hives throughout the whole year? The answer, in my opinion, is yes. Colonies have naturally choose what we are beginning to learn is something called passive thermoregulation. So part of the biological evolution of our honeybees is that they choose locations that are heavily insulated, like tree cavities or wall cavities inside live houses, so they can actually, get a heat source from inside that house through drywall or some thin board coating on the inside wall, whatever it is. So bees have already chosen for passive thermoregulation. So they're depending on insulation, especially if they live in a tree. So if you provide them with insulation all year long, it does nothing except support their natural biological tendency. It will not harm them whatsoever. Insulation would help them if they're trying to regulate against heat, which occurs in the summertime when we have heat waves. Bees have to manage the heat. If the colony's insulated and you're not adding a whole bunch of unnecessary ventilation, then insulation works to the benefit of the bees' efforts to control heat in the colony also. So it works on both ends, just like it does in your walls. You stay cooler in your house because your walls are insulated in the summer. And in the summer, you stay warmer in your house because your walls are insulated. And in the winter, you stay warmer in your house because your walls are insulated. Same thing goes for bees in their natural habitat.
Bill, I saw your videos on the primal hive. Would you
Yeah.
comment on that system?
Well, it's like sort of from an engineering standpoint, from a thermodynamic standpoint, it seems like they've hit the sweet spot, but it has unfortunate obstacles to get over before it's a workable colony for you guys. So I would suggest that you do not spend the $800 to buy that colony. I didn't know that when I did that video, I didn't know that that thing was going to cost $800. But they sent me 2 samples, so we have them in the bee yard. You can see how they work. I'm not anywhere near as enthused after having worked them for a season, but from a thermal fluids perspective and how the colony manages all of the internal flows, heat flows, and all of that, and how the brood nests are built, and how much honey they put in it. That's all good. It kind of is hard to work in the bee yard. I couldn't get the frames back in one time. I couldn't even figure out why I couldn't get the frames back in. Once I pulled one out, I couldn't get it. Folks that were at the bee yard, they watched me struggle with trying to get one of them frames back in. So anyway,
Bill, last spring, during an interview with an expert who I don't remember, it was commented that one of the best things we can select for is early appearance of drones. Can you expand on why this is such a key trait to choose?
yeah, so that doesn't really make much difference in our climate. But you really is not a trait that I know of anyone has ever tried to select for. What has been done, well, first of all, the reason for the early appearance of drones is that you can mate out queens earlier. So if there aren't any drones flying, you wouldn't be able to mate out any queens. Now, decades ago, a very ambitious beekeeper who went to Cornell and did something really kind of interesting. He overwintered virgin queens, and he kept them alive, and they produced in the spring, they produced the only thing they could lay were haploids, so they made a ton of drones early in the season. As a matter of fact, they made drones way before any queens were flying. So yeah, so his name was Jerica. He wrote a little book on it. If you want to look him up, I can't remember what he called it. Northern Beekeeping, I think, was one of the was the title. And he's an interesting guy. He's still around, and but I don't think he's doing much beekeeping right now. But yeah, he found a way to raise colonies by overwintering virgin queens, and in the spring they made a bunch of drones. And his goal was to try to get early queens mated in the Northeast, but no one's really ever been that successful in that. We depend primarily on queens that are mated in warmer climates and other climates. So, but long before we can mate them out here. But I don't know how you would select for that. We're too busy trying to keep varroa under control to mate for that kind of stuff. But anyway, so thanks so much for coming. We're going to call it that.